I have no problem with the medical use of cannabis, just as I have no problem with the medical use of opiates. If a drug is needed for a valid medicinal purpose, though, and is being administered safely, there should be no question of its legality. And if a drug that's proven to be safe abroad is needed here, it should be available. I agree that the regulation of medicines is a thicket of complexity, bureaucracy, and corporate and institutional self-interest. My basic contention is that something that's been found to be safe in a reliable jurisdiction shouldn't need to be tested again here.
Marijuana is a gateway drug. The risk of graduating to ice or to heroin from extended marijuana use is real and documented. This action by the Greens risks the health of Australians. It should be rejected and they should withdraw it, and we will oppose it.
Herb. Herb is a plant. I mean, herbs are good for everything. Why these people who want to do so much good for everyone, who call themselves governments and this and that, why them say you must not use the herb? Because it make you rebel. Against what?
Excuse me while I light my splay. Oh God, I got to take a leave from reality. I just can't dream.
Hello, today is the 30th of November 2018 and you're listening to the Australian Cannabis Review podcast. And thanks for joining me again this week. Today is part 5 of our series of discussion about the medicinal cannabis stocks listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. As this is a very new industry, I thought we'd discuss the stocks that are listed and kind of see what's out there. There's a lot of variety at the moment, so even though it's a fairly new space, you have companies that are working in the field of cultivation, growing, so providing systems to grow cannabis, but just as well as other produce as well. You've got pharmaceutical space, the health and well-being or nutraceutical space, biotech companies focused in hemp, and some companies also focused in kind of the investment space. So we've kind of discussed these over the last 4 weeks, and just to wrap it up this week, I'm going to go and do a bit of an overview of the last 5 companies I've got to go through. So these companies are a little bit bigger than some of the ones I've been talking about. So in week 1 and week 2, I talked about Can Group and Ozcan. So there was an individual podcast dedicated to them. There's a lot kind of to learn about those companies. Then 2 podcasts back, I talked about the bottom 7 companies. And the last podcast, I talked about another 7 companies that are kind of in the mid-range. And I've got 5 more companies to talk about today, and I'm going to go over them pretty briefly. Some of them, pretty much all of them, I'd like to dedicate a whole podcast to, because they are really doing a lot of interesting things. And the amount of time I'm going to dedicate to today isn't really justifying what these companies do as a whole and what they're really about, but a brief overview will still kind of get you started in the space if you want to investigate a little bit further yourself. And just a public service announcement before I continue. All of this stuff I'm talking about is just for your kind of entertainment and educational purposes only, so none of this stuff should be taken as investment advice. If you kind of feel like you do want to invest in these companies, then do a lot of research yourself. So you can visit cannabisontheasx.com. We've got a overview of all these companies and the announcements they've made. Probably even better yet is look directly on the company's websites and on the ASX website, and just read through their announcements, look through their financials, and see if it's a company that's you want to invest in. But taking away the investment side of things, what some of these companies are doing is kind of really interesting as well. So I'm going to talk about them. Some of them are in the pharmaceutical space, some of them selling products, some of them in the hemp space, and there's going to be an investment company in there as well. So look, what they're doing, I think, is pretty interesting as well, even if, you know, you're not wanting to invest in these per se yourself. So, kind of without further ado, let's get stuck into it. So the first company off the bat is MGC Pharmaceuticals. Their ASX ticker code is MXC, and they're a European-based specialist medicinal cannabis company, and they're built to be an international pioneer in phytocannabinoid-based medicines within the biopharmaceutical industry. Now, MGC, they've been trading since around 2015, and they did a reverse takeover of a gold exploration company. So it hasn't really been uncommon for some of these medicinal cannabis stocks to start their life out as a company by doing a reverse takeover of an existing company. Some of the other ways that companies have started out is by doing IPOs, but this company did it through the reverse takeover option. Now, I've looked at this company over the last few years, and they've pretty much got, you know, a few kind of different business plans or ideas. So they've got their pharmaceuticals, and they've got their derma stream as well. Now, actually, there's been some news about their MGC derma business where they've actually decided to sell that to a company called Canna Global. And in September, that's kind of when talks started, and that's when they made an announcement on the ASX that they were wanting to sell their MGC derma brand and products to Canna Global. I think they signed an agreement where it's probably worth in the range of about $12 million. Just as a note, the market cap of MGC derma is about $60 odd million. So they're getting $12 million from that, and they've signed some kind of agreements in that space. But they're pretty much just creating, you know, some cosmetic products that have cannabinoids in them, or, you know, medicinal marijuana in them. They think that these products, you know, will be better than some of the other beauty products on the market. As this is a space that I'm really not too knowledgeable about, and I'm kind of learning a little bit more about, they are pretty much just kind of getting some, you know, IP, so intellectual property, around some of their products. They've got a fair few cosmetic materials, and yeah, you know, you can buy it online. They've signed some agreements with some companies to sell their products. Earlier on in the year, they signed an agreement with Pharma, which they touted that was worth a $40 million deal. And that's a Korean company. And yeah, they didn't really materialize by any means. So now they're kind of taking them to court about that. And if we want to talk about the share price of MGC derma, well, look, they started off at about, you know, a couple of years ago, they were around 2-3 cents. What I've noticed is that sometimes this stock price can get really pumped up after some news, and it can just fly even without any announcements made to the market. So usually that's a sign that probably some information's been leaked to the market, and some people that know something that you don't know are getting in early. But look, I think as a company, look, they're doing some alright stuff. I guess with some of their products, they've also got, you know, some research partners, so RMIT University, they've got some distribution partners, they're collaborating with a number of people, they're selling their product. So yeah, they're doing okay, but they're not making a profit just as of yet either. And yeah, it's a company that's okay in my eyes, but they're not kind of a true marijuana play. So they're not really jumping up on my radar, at least. And as a company to invest in, well, I would always advise do your own research. Okay, so that sums up MXC, or MGC Derma Pharmaceuticals. Moving on next to Medlab Clinical, or MDC. Now, Medlab Clinical is a medical research and development company. They're engaged in researching and formulating novel biotherapeutics to improve health outcomes in early to moderate stage chronic diseases, such as chronic kidney disease, pre-diabetes, and obesity. Some of the company's products contain nutraceutical products such as Multibiotic, MG Optima Relax, NRG Biotic, Nanocell, among others. The principal segment of this company is nutraceuticals, which include the sale of nutraceutical products. They're also doing pharmaceutical research, and they generate most of their revenue at the moment from the sale of nutraceutical products. And good thing is, this company is located in Australia, so they're a local company. And they've been around for a few years as well. Look, as far as research into cannabis, I really like what they're doing in that respect, because they're creating some more products for the market. They're beneficial for people. Kind of one of their big flag items is a product called Nanobit Oil, and that product is currently being tested in some hospitals in Sydney. They're also doing some trials on a product called Nanobis as well, so that's kind of going through the process as well. Their kind of research portfolio covers, like I mentioned before, obesity, chronic kidney diseases, depression, musculoskeletal and muscle loss associated with aging, and non-opioid pain management. They've got a really good website, I reckon, and you can buy some of their products from there. I haven't used them. I've read some kind of reviews that they're not too bad. But look, I think any research in this space to kind of promote a good sense of well-being and health, and if these products seem to work for people for, the various ailments that they have, I think that's great. As a stock itself, they had a capital raising earlier on in the year, and they managed to raise some funds, but the share price has kind of been going down lately, so it's kind of in the mid-30s. The company's got a market cap of around $74 million. They have plenty of money in the bank, and they're still kind of doing more research. They're selling some stuff, but they're not at the stage of making a profit just yet. And I know I'd like to see them kind of expand into the international markets as well. That would maybe open up some revenue for them. But at the moment, look, like a lot of these companies, I really like what they do. Because I'm talking about companies that are on the ASX, I kind of feel like I have to mention how I think that they'll go from an investment point of view. And look, they kind of got the fundamentals to be a really good company, because don't forget that most of these companies I'm talking about, they're in that kind of small cap, micro cap space, which means that their market caps aren't very high, and they've only been around for a few years. So they're kind of in the early stages, and, like with any company, when they're in the early stages, it's going to be kind of hard. You got to really slug it out. You got to find your way into the market. You got to gain market share. You've got to find customers and loyal customers that keep coming back and buying your product. That always helps. So, in a kind of business sense, they're kind of doing the right thing. They're putting along nicely. But until these companies kind of, start getting some general solid revenue, and if you're just kind of listening to this and just thinking about an investment options, well, look, because their share prices are kind of so low, and maybe the market that they're in is a multi-billion-dollar market, and if they can really tap into that and get those kinds of revenues that maybe some people are expecting, then their share prices are going to rocket. But so many companies in this space as well, not just in Australia but also around the world, it kind of feels at times that maybe it's getting, I don't want to say oversaturated, but there's definitely a lot of competition out there. So it's going to be hard. But at the end of the day, some of these stocks might stick out more than others, and I like what MDC are doing as well. So that wraps up Medlab. Nearly, I've still got one more thing. Another good thing about them, they do have their licenses which they need, so they can to sell and supply cannabis in Australia. And yeah, they're always constantly doing research, developing products, so they're heading in the right direction. Moving on now, the newest company in this bunch, Althea Group Holdings. Their ASX ticker code is AGH. And Althea Group, they're also an Australian-based company, and they're mainly engaged in the importation, cultivation, production, and supply of medicinal cannabis. And look, they only listed on the Australian Stock Exchange towards, I think it was the 24th of September, or 21st of September 2018, so they've only been around for just over a few months. Look, they're getting all their licenses that they need, which is really good for them. So they've got their manufacturing license, and they've been granted a license to export as well. They've also got a medicinal cannabis license, which includes cultivation and production, and an import license as well. So, as I mentioned, their kind of business plan is to import, cultivate, produce and supply. They're ticking all those boxes. They're going about their business in a very good way. What I really like about them as well is that one of the largest cannabis companies in the world, which is listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, is Althea Inc. And they hold a 25% holding in Althea. And they even had this holding before the prospectus was even announced back in early September 2018. So, look, Althea, the third largest cannabis company in the world, backing this company, which means that Althea will have access to Althea's, expertise, knowledge, and they're going to be able to help them in a very big way, especially when this industry is so new. And yeah, the company, they raised about $20 million at 20 cents per share, but it was only to institutional investors as well, so it wasn't that the general public could invest in this company, which, yeah, kind of sucks as well, because you could have bought these shares at 20 cents per share, and at the end of the first day, they closed at 56 cents per share. So a lot of people made a lot of money just overnight, pretty much. The share price now has retreated back to around the high 30s mark, and maybe that's a justified position for them at the moment. The company does have a market cap of around in the 70s, $80 million as well. Yeah, and the money that they did get from that capital raising as well, so what they plan to do with that is to design and construct a manufacturing facility. At the moment, they only mentioned that they want to produce around 3 tons of cannabis a year, which, kind of when you look at all the other companies out there, it's not really a massive amount, but, it's a start, and this is a new industry. They're a Melbourne-based company, and, they're even announcing that they've got, 42 doctors, or even more right now, prescribing their products throughout Australia. They've got just under a couple hundred patients who have been approved to use Althea medicinal cannabis, and they kind of want to hit, really high levels of user uptake. So, first they want to hit 1,000 patients using their drugs, and then of course, they think that there could be up to 1 million people in Australia potentially using medicinal cannabis products. So, look, it's a market that's really, really undervalued at the moment, and well, it's a new industry. It's also not so easy to kind of just subscribe